speaking with when I was in Cairo some months ago, and since then, young activists from Egypt. Our embassy has certainly been reaching out, because going from being demonstrators for freedom to being political actors, that's not an easy transition. And so we want to help people get themselves organized so that they are able to participate effectively. And again, with the conditions of nonviolence and all the others that I laid out, but no conditionality on our aid.
Yeah. Well, helping others. This is a sentence that might fuel some concerns in Egypt about funding NGOs. Mm-hmm. Why do you really fund NGOs in Egypt?
I think it is something we have done for many years, and we have learned from long practice that when you have a transition, a democratic transition, many people want to be active in politics. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to register voters, how to form political parties. It's not part of the experience that has been the daily life of Egyptians. So we have several organizations that have worked all over the world. We do not take positions. We're not for or against any party or any individual. It's more the nuts and bolts. How do you run an election? Because you've had elections, but they were not free or fair or transparent, and they didn't build confidence in the Egyptian people. We want Egypt to have the best election it's ever had. And so our experience, particularly coming out of the fall of the Berlin Wall, where countries in Eastern and Central Europe came to us and said, help us do this. The democratic transition across Africa, where we were helpful. We don't have any stake in who's elected. We wait to see who the people choose. But we think our non-governmental organizations have a lot to contribute. We are more than happy to follow the rules of Egypt, but...
I was just going to ask about that, because it's against the law, and there's so many NGOs that working outside the law and certain regulations.
Right.
So how are you going to do that?
Well, we would like our NGOs to be registered. We would like for them to be under Egyptian law. I will say it's a little ironic because, President Mubarak didn't want us to have NGOs that were working with people either. So we think that Egypt is strong enough and resilient enough that appropriate regulation can recognize, who the NGOs are that are working for the betterment of Egypt. Because I said to the foreign minister yesterday, we're there. We are saying, look, we want to help people know how to run elections. We know that there are groups and countries that are funneling money into Egypt, and nobody knows about it. You know what we're doing, and we're going to be as transparent with the government as possible. But I would ask that everybody in Egypt, say, look, the Americans are here to help us, decide who we want to elect. Some people are trying to determine who gets elected. There's a big difference.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, you're speaking right now about your reflections in Tahrir Square. When did you really feel that Mubarak has no chance?
I was as surprised as everybody else in the world that this happened as it did, because I knew something would happen someday, but I didn't expect it so soon. I had given a speech in Doha just a few weeks before saying that, the foundations of these authoritarian regimes in the region were sinking into the sand. And then we saw Tunisia, and we saw Egypt, and then Libya, and we see all of the aspirations of the people coming forth. But I think, we were trying very hard, and our military was communicating directly. I was communicating directly with officials in the Mubarak regime to urge, no violence against demonstrators, to urge that people be treated respectfully, that they had a right to demonstrate peacefully. And, when you think about it, for as large a country as Egypt, what happened was remarkable, the way that it transitioned so quickly. And I think that we all saw it happening before our eyes, and we were doing our best to try to make sure that there was, limited or as little bloodshed as possible, and some agreement on a way to go forward that would, permit people's people's feelings and opinions to finally be heard and then to have a democratic transition. And now that's what we're seeing.
What was was there a certain point? Because we all remember your first statement when you were thinking, and everybody was thinking at the same time, the same thing, is that we do have a stable government in Egypt. And a few days ago, everything has changed.
Right.
When was that point for you?
I think for me, it was when I concluded that there wasn't any way that President Mubarak and the people closest to him could understand what was really happening. And there was no...
They were out of touch.
They were out of touch. And it was becoming clearer and clearer because of the responses. I mean, I had many conversations with many high-level officials, as did others in our government, urging, you must first of all protect people, but secondly, you must change, and you've got to recognize that this has to, the new Egypt is being born. It was just no way to communicate that. And we tried. We sent very direct messages.
I know you're running on a very tight schedule, and I have one more question to go. Everybody was looking to the Obama administration with, I think you had a problem of high expectation. How are you going to deal with the Palestinian application in the United Nations, especially that everybody's really think it will go through the General Assembly?
Let me reiterate that President Obama and I very much want to see a Palestinian state. And I have been publicly on record in favor of that since the 1990s. I was the first person associated with the United States government to do that. And President Obama is also very committed. But we, I think, are realists that no matter what happens or doesn't happen in the United Nations, unless we can get the Palestinians and the Israelis to negotiate over the boundaries of the state, the security provisions, what happens in Jerusalem, what happens with refugees, water, all of the issues we know so well have to be resolved. We're going to raise expectations without being able to deliver. I mean, if the United Nations passes a resolution which says we want to see Palestinians become a state and maybe we upgrade their status or maybe we recognize them, the next day nothing changes in Ramallah. And I want things to change. I want the Palestinians to have their own state. I want them to govern themselves. I want them to continue developing economically, to be a real example, to work with Egypt for the betterment of the people in the region. And we know that won't happen. So what we have said is very straightforward. We want to see both sides back at the table, and we criticize and make absolutely clear we don't want to see provocative actions. We've said that about the recent announcements from the Israeli government. But we also know that the Palestinians have to be willing to negotiate. And it's hard for them because they feel like, they've been at this for a while and nothing has happened. Both sides have their case to be made. Make it at the negotiating table. And that's what we're pushing for.
Madam Secretary, we thank you very much for being with us today, for the time you've given us. We hope to see you soon in Cairo and have the same chance again.
Thank you. I would look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.